Hi, I'm Greg Voisen. I'm the host of Inside Personal Growth, and I want to welcome Thais Gibson. She owns the Personal Development School, and she is sponsoring our podcast, and we are so pleased that she is. Now, she offers a program at the Personal Development School that I want to let you know a little bit about. She says the best relationship and lives don't just happen. You can make them happen. If you tried it at all and feel stuck, it might be due to your attachment style. This is the hidden force shaping your beliefs and behaviors. Thais Gibson at the Personal Development School has uncovered a method to transform your attachment style, helping you become your best self. With an all-access pass, you'll get on-demand courses, live webinars, and study groups for deep personal growth. And for my listeners, we're offering an exclusive 50% discount on the quarterly membership. That's just $149 every 3 months. Find the link in the show notes, and the discount will apply at checkout. Start transforming your relationships today. Thanks for listening to Inside Personal Growth. And please go to the Personal Development School, Thais Gibson, to learn more about your personal attachment style. Well, Happy New Year to everybody. This is Greg Voisen from Inside Personal Growth. I have Glenn Llopis on the line, joining us from, where are you joining us from, Glenn?
From Holly Springs, North Carolina, just 15 minutes outside of Raleigh.
Wonderful area. I've been there. He moved from Southern California to there. How long ago?
3 years ago.
3 years ago. And I met Glenn in 2010 at a conference he was putting on at Chapman University for business people. We did an interview about his book, Earning Serendipity, in 2010. We've done 3 others. This will be the 4th. And we're going to be talking today about a book that I think actually, given the times we're in, given the new year that people are in, it's called Make Reinvention Your Superpower, 6 Skills to Escape Career Quicksand and Revive Your Future. There you go. Now, Glenn, you have a long background, but he also has a podcast show, because you guys can see it. It says On Air, sitting in his studio. And I'm going to tell the listeners a tad bit about you, if you don't mind me doing that. Are you good, or would you?
No. Whatever you'd like. I'm here to support you, Greg. I appreciate you.
Okay. So he is a Cuban-American best-selling author, speaker, a senior advisor to Fortune 500 organizations, providing guidance to different industries over 15 years. Back in 22, only 2 years ago, his book then was Unleashing Individuality, which explores how to unleash the power of individuality in the age of increasing conformity. And he also is a leadership strategy contributor to Forbes, and he has articles that have been published in Harvard Business Review and Entrepreneur Magazine, and you can find more about him. One thing I want to say about your new book, Glenn, is that this is a really how-to book. I just want to tell my people, look, there's exercises in here. There's QR codes. You can download a little workbook, guidebook. He and I were just speaking about that ahead of time. The QR code goes to this little workbook that you should download and use with the book. And Glenn, you and I, prior to this, were just kind of bantering back and forth about, where we are in life. And I was being very vulnerable. And I want this podcast at the beginning of the year to be a new way for maybe me to even break my egg open even more, right? And be more vulnerable to the audience. And I think this book asks the questions to know yourself. Who are you? Meaning to my listeners and even to me, right? Because we go through this life, we get caught up in all the hustle and bustle and flow. We take very little time to do this. This book will have you sit down and be thinking about that. So reinvention's a really interesting word. And I think whether you're individually or you're a corporation and you're reinventing yourself or you're individual, there's a lot of similarities that go on in analyzing where you are, where you want to go, and what values you want to stand for, what vision you have. And you emphasize reinvention is continuous process of learning. Agreed. I've been doing the show now. This is my 18th year with 1,185 podcasts, and I've used it as um, a learning platform for me and hopefully the listeners. And you said it's learning and then it's unlearning. That's the big one, because our subconscious mind is so powerful that frequently getting in there and unprogramming and then reprogramming is one. One of those is, are you enough? Right? It's a big one for men, women, everybody. And then it's relearning, you say. How do you personally identify when it's time? I think I might know the answer to this one for reinvention, because usually when corporations reinvent, when individuals reinvent, there's some big pain that actually triggers reinvention. Um, whether it's a loss of money or it's not being satisfied. I even said this morning in a training that I did. I said, when do people most change and then hopefully frequently change for good? When they got cancer, they had a heart attack, they had a near-death experience. Something hit them pretty hard. I don't think we have to wait that long, do we, Glenn?
No, we don't. And that's first of all, Greg, thanks for having me on again. Always enjoy your show and appreciate all you've put into it for others to learn from. So thank you. This is a big question. Um, we know it's time when we feel suppressed. Simple. How do we know we feel suppressed? When we feel like everybody has defined who we should be rather than ourselves. And we reach the point where we just feel so disconnected with reality. Our well-being is at an all-time low. And I don't want to use the word stuck, even though I just shared it, but you've reached a point where you just don't feel as if you add any value to anything anymore.
Mm.
And I've learned through my work over the past 17 years, Greg, that, we've spent a lot of time following everybody else's advice. We have spent a lot of time being told to follow everybody else's playbook but our own. But yet in this process, we've lost ourselves to the point where nobody really knows anybody anymore. I mean, I've never experienced a time that is the most opportunistic in modern history, but yet a time where people feel so alone. And that sense of loneliness comes when you feel like you don't matter anymore. And this happens because we've given everybody else so much more power, so much more importance than we do ourselves. Now, I know that when we were preparing for this interview, you wanted me to go deep and vulnerable and throw it all out there. So I'm going to just get this thing started, since you had mentioned that this is your first show of the year.
May I insert thing real quick? Sorry to interrupt.
No,
but
it's fine.
You're bringing up, and I want this to be a dialogue. Importantly, about 4 or 5 weeks ago, a gentleman from Silicon Valley, Dr. Adam Dorsey, he wrote a book called Super Sight, and he's done all this. I'm going to call it counseling plus research on loneliness. Well, we've heard from the Surgeon General. We've got a loneliness epidemic, right? You and I just said to you, hey, being a CEO of a company is frequently lonely. That's one of the words I used just 5 minutes ago before we came on the air. That, I'm running a business, you're running a business, and it can be extremely lonely. I'm addressing not only the CEOs of the company, but everybody else in the company who feels this tension right now. This tension to perform in a certain way because that's what's expected of you, whatever it might be. And I just want to say to you now, sorry for interrupting and putting that in the middle, but I think that it's important that this loneliness epidemic, because that's where this triggered me when you said it, is so huge. What are some of the anecdotes do you believe we can do individually and collectively to move through that?
I'm gonna get there. I'm gonna get there,
Okay.
but
Okay.
I want to continue with this thread of thought, because I'm not just speaking with you now, Greg. I'm speaking with all your listeners,
Mm-hmm.
and so as I communicate this, I want to know that I'm saying this on behalf of all of you. That this level of suppression, this level of isolation and loneliness, it's the worst it's ever been.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because in the past, there's always somewhere we can go to, a book we can read, a playbook we can follow, an employer or a friend that can guide us. But that doesn't exist anymore. And why doesn't it? This is important because there was a time where we cared about each other. And over time, what's happened is we've become this zero-sum game society where for someone to win, someone has to lose. And then it's accelerated to the point where now it's about how people value based upon what you have, not who you are. So what does that mean? That it's all of these things that surround us that create a perception of who we are. The car I drive, the home I have, the books I sell, whatever is that people find of value. And then we chase that. But at the same time, what we do is we are running away from who we are because we continue at an accelerated rate battle the gulf between assimilation and authenticity. In other words, we put more value on being what other people want us to be rather than what we seek to be ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And what's happened now, and we know why this has happened. I mean, we could say social media all you want, technology. I even think AI is going to do a lot of this in the future. But the point is that we are so lost that we don't know how to reboot ourselves. People think, well, that costs money. No, it actually doesn't cost a dime.
Mm-hmm.
What it costs is time. But I want to give all of you an example of what I went through, right, to go through something like this. Because, I've often said that I will never advise somebody of something if I haven't experienced it or done it myself.
Agreed.
No, well, I'm glad you agree, because
Yeah.
that's not the world we live in. We live in a world of self-proclaimed experts, all these thought leaders, and we make the assumption that just because it works for them, it works for us. That's not true. That's how we got into this mess, because we felt that because it worked for you, it's going to work for me. And that doesn't work that way. Much like corporations, they've learned the hard way too. Well, if Tesla did it that way, then we must. If this company did it that, and they call that benchmarking. And what that's done, it's created an environment of mediocrity. Because if all you're doing is trying to copycat what everybody else is doing, and trying to do that with different people in your organization that's different from everybody else's that you're copying, you're coming to the realization that you have been in isolation yourself, because even you don't know what to do. And so,
Well, do speak about, just pardon me again, but
sure, no, go ahead.
Personalization Outbreak, your podcast,
Yeah,
is about this.
it sure is.
It's exactly what we're talking about. So for my listeners, if you want to hear good podcasts, I was listening to one just prior to coming on with Glenn. Go to the Personalization podcast, Personalization Outbreak. I think there's 120 episodes. You got a long way to go, buddy.
It's you know what I've learned is that I will never reach your epic proportions, but I will reach enough for what people are hungry for.
Exactly. I was listening to one you were doing with a Hispanic woman. It was interesting about, you look at the culture and the population and so on. What I do want to say, and again, I hate for interrupting, but you're bringing up so many great points, and I want to make certain that the audience not only gets our message, but gets it in a very meaningful way. So, you in the book, you mentioned reinvention is not a solo act. So, this is asking for help. I have this little thing that pops up on my screen, and it said, it's okay to ask for help, right? And I think part of, when you say about these mentors or these thought leaders who set these examples and it's not for everybody listening knows there's probably 4 or 5 people in your core group you can go to ask for help. Okay. Hopefully you've got those people, right? Somebody you really trust, somebody you respect, somebody you honor. So, how can leaders and individuals effectively, and in this case, I wrote one about a corporation, but I'm going to say even individuals. How are we best going to reach out, ask for help, and feel okay about that, Glenn?
Okay, well, I'll share that story that I mentioned I was going to share earlier. And
Right.
this has to do with one thing. You have to face your truth, period. You have to face your truth. And I am convinced that people know their truths, but I'm also convinced that it takes a lot for someone to face theirs. In fact, as I was reading that, I wanted to, if I may, getting down to authenticity here. I want to read something I received yesterday from an
Okay.
individual and tell me if this sounds familiar. All right. Tell me if this sounds familiar. And oops, that's not it. And obviously I wasn't prepared to
You'll
share this.
find it. You'll
But just
find it.
give me a moment because I think it's worth the time because this is, I think, a message that everybody can agree with. So I'm going to give it 15 seconds. If I don't find it, here it is. Got it. He said this. He said, Glenn, this is Torrance from the men's group. So I'm part of a men's group because I myself have faced my truth and I'm seeking for help myself. Happy New Year. Hope all's well. I just started reading your book, Make Reinvention Your Superpower. I wanted to share that the career quicksand portion of the introduction hit me so hard and was so spot on that it made me emotional. This really shows me the true power of our group. The feelings and emotions stated in this section are feelings I have kept buried deep within myself, feelings I would never want anyone else to know because I have always wanted to maintain a front that everything is just fine. Now, I think we could all relate to that.
Yeah.
And so I share this because your reality is nobody else's reality, and no one can really understand what you're really going through. But you do because you're the one feeling it. So what happened? 4 years ago, I declared that I was a workaholic. My admin, Sandy, sent me on a plane. I went to Arizona and I spent 5 days at a retreat. They said, Glenn, why are you here? And I had 3 answers. 1, how do I disconnect? 2, how do I care less? And 3, how am I going to last another 45 years, at least, for my then 5-year-old daughter? To get to the point, let me see if I give you a visual. Imagine, this is what they told me at the very end. They had me shake a snow globe. And they said, Glenn, shake that as hard as you can. And you could envision that snow globe. They said, Glenn, this is what you walked in with. Your mind was clouded, just like yours and everybody else's that came here. And most people, Glenn, live their entire lives that way. And what you've done is you have faced your truth. And now that you've accepted and have found your answers to your questions, which I'll share momentarily, you are ready to move to the next phase of you breaking out of this addiction that you have with work. So how do I disconnect? I have to connect more with myself. How do you care less? You need to care more about yourself. How am I going to last another 45 years? Follow those 2 things. And I can tell you I have followed them as hard and as smart as I can for the past, since I got back. Why is this important? I had to confront my truth. And it really boils down to one thing. Are you really looking for your own happiness? Or are you going to spend your entire life comparing yourself to other people that have nothing to do with your happiness? And I think this is where reinvention comes into play and why it's so important, because it's not a solo act, Greg, but you don't earn the right to go along with others until you've been honest enough with yourself to be able to share your truth with others. Because no one's going to want to be part of your reinvention team unless they know why they're there and why you've even asked them to be on the ride with you. So I share this because part of reinvention not being a solo act, it begins with the first three parts of this book. You have to discover who you are, and I'll go into that later. Then you have to know, based upon knowing who you are, how you're constantly adopting an always open learning mindset. And then it's time to pursue. But it's not until you start pursuing this on your own can you then bring others along. So I share this because part of it not being a solo act is the fact that you've taken the time to know what matters to you, and now put yourselves on a trajectory where you can start rebuilding your network and really knowing the people who can be part of your team moving forward.
Well, you said something really interesting. You said you were addicted to work, and you said shake the snow globe, and obviously that's the way you came in, not very clear about your truth, who Glenn was, right? And
I wasn't clear why I was working all the time. Now I understand why.
so here's my point. When an individual, whether it's an individual a little older in life, midlife, wherever it might be in their stages of life, have a cloudy snow globe, right? There's fear, there's discomfort about changing. How did you address those issues? Because look, you were stuck in that game for shit from 2010 to 2021, I guess, right? You finally gave it all up and you went to North Carolina, and you were a workaholic. I knew it from the beginning. I knew it when I saw you in 2010. You were like going 1,000 miles an hour, dude. And it was just from observation, but that doesn't mean I wasn't going 1,000 miles an hour too. So the way I look at it is, well, how did you disengage, Glenn, to actually observe yourself, you observing self, and saying, I want to, I say this many times on this show. If a video camera followed you back in 2010 and you watched the video camera back, would you have liked what you saw? Then the question is, now that the camera's following you in 2024, what did you change and what's different about what the video camera sees?
Yeah, very good question. I think your observations were right on. I mean, you would have seen someone that almost is twitching, someone that can't wait to get to the next thing, do the next thing, achieve the next thing, want more and more and more. And, we often refer to that as the hamster wheel, right? But what you would see in 2025 is someone who is unafraid of unknowns, who is more relaxed, still passionate, but someone that knows himself and knows that I have nothing to prove to anyone. And there's something very powerful in feeling that way, because I'm not competing against anybody anymore. I'm not trying to be more than what I've accomplished. Look, when I wrote this last book, I dedicated it to my daughter. You know why, Greg? Because I'm 58 years old. I may not be around for another, 50 years, but my legacy's done. I mean, this is not about me. I've always got into this business because I was here to create future legacies. And the number one priority for me is my daughter and my wife, of course. I don't have to chase a sale anymore. I don't have to do those things. And so I'm at a point where I'm clear. I know who I am. I know why I'm on this earth. I know the value that I create. I know how to commercialize what I do uh, for the right reasons, not for myself, but for the advancement of others. And when you have that sense of clarity, nothing else really matters. And I know where I fit and where I don't, where I could add value and where I don't. I know what spaces I need to be in and those I don't need to be in. And it's not a competitive rat race anymore. I'm clear. And I
But it
think,
did take you a number of years to learn that. And I think if there's some way we could short circuit, hack the gap for people, my book's called Hacking the Gap, a journey from intuition to innovation and beyond. Um, so the reality is, it's like, how do I, if I'm 20 years old listening to this podcast, I don't want to get it stuck in this career quicksand.
no, yeah,
So
well,
let's so let's talk about these 6 essential skills for reinvention. I'm gonna combine a couple of questions together, and then could you share a personal story where you've used some of these skills, and then address this? Well, why don't we just do that first? Let's go with
well,
the skills, because these look, if somebody listens to this podcast and says, "Hey, I want to take away from it," the 6 skills are going to be it, right? And
well,
we obviously could enumerate them, just like listing them off.
sure.
But what's
Well,
the story?
sure. Well, let's start with what it is that the book is solving for. It's helping you get out of your life and career quicksand. So what is that? Well, quicksand is the state of not only feeling stuck in your life or your career, but also a realization that your current job, the trajectory of your life, has no real meaning, purpose, and significance anymore. In fact, it fails to generate any personal value to one's life and to the life of others.
Mm.
And so I just want to be clear with that because, yeah, it's a catchy term, but it's in a place where most people are in, Greg. And so how do you get out of it? I'll start with the first one. Um, and before I go continue, you mentioned something about this next generation. I'm going to be very bold and say that next generation will have a head start to our generation, Greg, because they don't have to do as much unlearning as we do.
Of course.
Okay. They won't have to do as much unlearning. And so my advice to them is to create a mentor-mentee relationship where both are the mentor and both are the mentee, because both of you could add equal weight in value to one another. And it doesn't matter if that person has 30 more years of experience. It means it doesn't really have that much value, because I've met too many people that have a lot of experience but are completely irrelevant to solve today's opportunity. So I share that because don't fall into the trap of feeling that you need to be anybody else but yourself. So what's the first step? Again, high level. Number one is it's about discover. You need to harness your natural curiosity to discover something new. I mean, you have to look around. Look around with intentionality. What are you looking for? I mean, in fact, you may have to start looking in places that you've actually never looked before. Like, I'll give you a really simple example because since you and I have met, Greg, I've reinvented myself numerous times.
Yeah.
I mean, when we first met, I was just this new young author. I mean, trying to understand the industry. Now I host summits. I write for Forbes. I mean, I can go on and on. I'm a new, my own podcast, because I started to realize that the dimensions of who I am can't be defined by someone else. But they can certainly be guided by what others might think of you. When I say guided is, it's important to take inputs. Discovering who you are, a lot of it has to do with what other people expect from you. In other words, what's an easy way of getting this thing started is ask someone, based upon your experience and what you think you know of me, what do you expect from me? You'd be shocked at what people are gonna say to you. Based upon what you know about me or what you've experienced, what do you expect from me? You're not going to be happy with the answers. Why? Because you haven't been conscious, or maybe you have. And if you have, good for you. But most people are not consciously aware of how their actions are interpreted by other people. So over time, what ends up happening if you're inconsistent with who you are, you become someone that you're not. At least that's how you're perceived in the marketplace. And so I share this because as you're discovering, get those inputs, but also you have to trust yourself enough to know what it is that you're looking for. And this is part of reinvention, literally starting all over again. So, and be optimistic about what form that something might take place, right? Because you never really know where the wind's going to blow. For me, I never would have thought, 20 years ago that I was going to be an author. Never in my wildest dreams. I didn't sign up for it, didn't think that would even a possibility. And so I ran with it and continue to run with it. But what I did is I continued to discover different dimensions about myself. I created 5 books, but they're all interconnected. This is the work that I do every day in working with organizations and individuals. I help them discover themselves. In fact, I've identified certain patterns in people that I come to learn that the biggest barrier for people discovering themselves is that they have forced themselves to become part of environments that they actually don't trust, but they actually feel like they belong in those environments.
Well,
So
you call those standardized environments.
Well, I call her as environment.
What? Yeah. I just versus personalized. And you said there's this tension between personalized and standardized organizations. But so look, I love how you've approached this. I love the vernacular you're using to describe it because it's easy to understand. Yet the culture of the organization, we've switched gears a little bit here, but this applies to yourself as well, because this is how you see you versus how the world sees you, right? Mm-hmm. And you say that there are barriers, or you say that leaders try and find a balance between these two forces. So my question is, hey, you've got this organization which has this particular culture. I worked with Richard Barrett and all the best in the world doing trainings like this too. How would you approach an organization and help the leaders find a balance between allowing people to have their autonomy and personalization versus already what's been initiated with inside the organization as standardization?
Yeah, it's a big, big question, and I'm going to I'm going to simplify it for you, and I'm going to share a couple of statistics with you.
It is.
So where do you start, right? Because there's a starting point. Is it the environment, like the work environment that you belong to? Is it you as an individual, or is it both? What would you say, Greg? Is it the environment, the individual, or both? What do you think?
I would say, I think there's an ecosystem, let me put it that way, that each organization has. And I'm going to say that it is both.
Okay, so let's stop there. Okay, number one, you're exactly right. When I first started doing this work, I would have said the individual. Mm-hmm. But what did I learn? I learned that, and this is where corporate America, unfortunately, has spent millions of dollars and just hasn't gotten it right. Why? And I'll give you the short version. Because if we invest so much in the individual and then we expect them to do better for the organization, because let's be clear, we were trained to practice old ideas at the expense of new ones. Let me say this differently. We are trained to help the organization grow. We're not trained to become better individuals. They don't take stock in what matters to us. It's about what we can do to help them make more money. And I say that very respectfully, but now this game is changing. Why? Because now the individual is now a consumer. We're no longer we're someone that has choice now, a lot more choices than we have in the past. So now organizations know that they just can't rely on people hanging around for 10, 15 years anymore. Those days are done. So they have to invest in each individual and their career, where those people stay in their organizations or not. What's the point? You invest, but when those people now get invested in and they go back into the environment and they hit a brick wall, what happens? That individual employee loses faith of the intention behind the organization's culture goals. Because if you have the right culture and you are trying to do everything that you can to unleash the individual to do more and be more, and then they hit that brick wall, what's that tell you? That we have not taught the individual how to diagnose the workplace culture. And why is this important? Because what's the environment trying to do? Well, it should aim to align its business goals and its objectives with employees' capabilities. But we don't know employee capabilities. We make the assumption about who belongs where, doing what and how. So we really don't know who our people are. So,
Right.
and I shared that because when you look on the individual side, the goal should be unlocking their potential to actually accelerate our business goals. In other words, like you said, both the environment and individual carry equal weight. But until we understand how to diagnose the environment and unleash the capacity of our people, we can't even begin to think about finding that balance. So I share this because this is why we're in pursuit of finding balance. People don't understand how. So,
Well, what you do, Glenn, and I want to say this is again my perception. We're living in a world today where we're seeing a uprising and changing and proliferation. Even this use the healthcare industry. You were talking about healthcare. So the correlation here is, if I am a functional medicine doctor, I'm going to approach this in a different way about how I treat patients, meaning I'm not going to wait for the disease to occur to then spend a bunch of money so the insurance carrier says, well, the guy's got cancer now. I'm going to look at how could I work to prevent this person from getting cancer. In corporations, the cancer has already started forming under the standardization model. Pardon me for saying that. But the
what? It's
reality,
the truth. It's
yeah,
true.
exactly. And so my part is if they're going to invest money, let's put it invest money, the best investment they could make right now in 2025 is actually the same approach that a functional medicine doctor would take. How do I help this individual, personalization in your case, become healthier before they get sick inside that environment? Okay. So what you are is the functional medicine doctor for corporations, or however you want to put it. Would that be a good way to kind of put a ribbon on it?
Greg, that was epic. I salute you, man. That was great. With a perfect way. Keep going.
Well, look, I'm in a state, I'm 70. You said you're 59.
Hey,
As you age, 58, as you look, yeah, you do not have to accept dis-ease. You can do things to prevent it. So do everything you can to prevent osteoporosis, arthritis, cancer, whatever it might be. And if you do, now that doesn't mean you're not going to do it, but at least you were working toward the way you wanted your life to be, which was a healthy, productive. I like Benjamin Franklin. I was all used up. I virtually used up, whether I was working or whether I was doing philanthropic work. I was used up and I loved it. My point here is, you work in the healthcare field. I've seen some of your videos on the podcast, right? And the reality is that we've reached a turning point, Glenn, for organizational reinvention, personal reinvention, from the standardization in your case to the personalization model. And if corporations, again, would take your advice, which I'm sure many of them are, they would find, obviously, the outcome is happier employers, more engaged, less turnover, higher productivity, the kind of things they've all looked for. They look for all of that wrapped up in a bow as well. And I know as an individual, as a cultural change agent, you're the kind of guy that can make that happen, right? So
Thank
that's
you.
it. You said me to
Well,
go on, so I
no, no. Look, I appreciate that, Greg. But why is it so important that you kind of put that in a bow? Because that's really how simple it is.
right.
And but I will tell you that I've been challenged on this topic many times, saying, "Well, Glenn, how can you scale that?" And the question is, it's really simple. You have to take the time to know your people. But leaders today don't want to take the time to know their people. Let me give you an example that relates to the healthcare industry. And I'm sharing this one, Greg, because most people aren't going to know what I'm about ready to share. Nurses in this country run the U.S. healthcare system.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm saying at the provider side, at the hospital side,
All right.
what they do every day to tend to patients and support physicians and the institution and the communities that they serve is unbelievable. What most people don't know is that there is tension, and it's not healthy, between what nurses think is in the best interest of the hospital and what their executives believe is in the best interest of the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
Leadership, standardization. Nursing, personalization. Do I have to even describe that? Nurses, personalization. They tend to people and their unique needs. Standardization, leadership, KPIs, efficiency, outcomes. These two things don't always blend. They can, but it's going to take leadership, a very fundamental pivot, and that is there are other ways to get the outcomes than we've always got them.
Yeah, and
That's it.
so
It's
look,
that simple.
that is that simple. And if somebody was to summarize this book, what can it do? They can, make reinvention your superpower, which it would do, definitely. And I want to state one thing. There's a gentleman here who's been on the show several times and a personal friend from Del Mar, California, Dr. Steve Berman, Bierman, wrote a book called Healing Beyond Pills and Potions, now working with Andrew Weil at the University of Arizona on the Noetic Medicine Initiative. Now, Noetic, whether you look at placebo, nocebo, they have found through their work that now this goes to an HR director too. So I hope every HR director out here who's listening or every VP who's listening hears what I'm about to say. You said they don't know their people about 3 minutes ago. They don't care to know their people. Okay. So if a doctor doesn't care to know his patient, here's the same example. The likelihood of the person advancing disease in some area is like 300% more versus a doctor who has compassion, cares, and takes an understanding of wanting to know the patient and provide them with a prognosis. So let's say the prognosis is, instead of me phrasing it to you, hey, Glenn, yeah, you have cancer and there's a 80% chance of you dying. How about if I said, hey, Glenn, you have a little bit of cancer, but you literally have a 20% chance of living, and here's the things that you should do. So just changing the way I speak with you will change your psychology and will change literally your outcome of survival. Okay.
Well, how about this, Greg? If I may volley back, let's stop calling people cancer patients.
Right.
Let's start calling them human beings who have cancer.
Yeah.
It's the same thing that you're talking about. Because, see, they didn't fail cancer. Cancer failed them.
Mm-hmm.
And these are such small but yet powerful ways to approach even personal discovery. It reminds me of this gentleman. This is the social media influencer. His name is Brad Lee. And he shared with me, he's a dear friend of mine. He said, Glenn, there are winners and losers in life, but I'm observing more and more people who are winners who are losing.
Mm-hmm.
See the difference?
Mm-hmm.
See the
Yep.
difference? And so why are they losing? And yeah, they're winners, but why are they losing? Because people don't, a lot of people, most people don't want to accept the truth of what? Having to reinvent. In other words, I might have the best ideas to shape an organization's growth strategy, but if they're not ready, am I losing? No, they're losing because they haven't made themselves ready. And I think this is an important point about just our personal lives, even our professional lives. When it goes back to one of your original questions, when do you know that it's time to reinvent?
Right.
And I said, when you feel suppressed and you've reached a point where you've been defined by everybody else but yourself and you don't know how to reboot. In so many words, I said that. So what happens? You do nothing and you wait and you wait and you wait until hopefully something happens. But in the meantime, get stuck deeper and deeper and deeper into the quicksand. It's the same thing with organizations. They create this illusion of progress. Not all, but most big brands that everybody here is familiar with at the expense of real evolution. Who loses? The consumer. If you sell a product that's consumable, the consumer will. Why? Because they won't get the innovation fast enough from the brand that they expected it from. So does that employee who expected to be part of an organization that was going to grow and evolve because the brand's been around for 100 years. They lose too. In other words, they become less relevant as they're projecting their career trajectory. You see what's happening here? Over time, we're creating these environments of mediocrity. But yet we create the perception that, oh, no, I've been around 30 years. 30 years of what? Mediocrity?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not trying to be tough, Greg, but I'm trying to be a realist. And this is why I say it's the most opportunistic time in modern history, because today you can do something with yourself. In other words, maybe the marketplace is not ready for you, but that doesn't mean that you're not ready for yourself. Because
Well, I would say, Glenn, that conformity is rampant, meaning conformity to whatever the standardization is. To awaken a world inside of an organization, or I should say, awaken a culture for transformation. So use some good examples like Patagonia, where they allow autonomy and they allow their people to go surfing and they do all the good things that you should be doing versus corporations, which I'm not going to name any, but there's plenty of them that I know that are just the opposite because they're coming from fear. And it really comes from love and fear. Do you love your people? Or are you afraid that your people are going to do something and you're going to repress them and have this standardized approach? But I think anybody out there listening today who is young, middle aged, or even older age, and maybe they're changing careers, they're reinventing, they're saying, oh, good, I'm going to read this book and I'm now going to get out of me being a programmer for the last 30 years and I'm going to go be an artist. See, what we're advocating is that you follow your heart, that you follow your love, that you follow what you're compassionate about, and trust in the fact that things are going to come together for you. Now, you just said that. Hey, look, I moved to North Carolina. I've been trusting. I've let go of all of this heavy baggage and weight that I was carrying. For a lot of people, that's extremely fearful. So here's going to be my question for you wrapping this up. What advice would you give any people in those age brackets so that it would prevent them falling into the quicksand? Okay. In other words, let's say I'm 40. I don't like this job anymore. I want out, but I'm afraid as hell, man. I'm 50. I've gotten out, but now I'm unemployed and I'm having a hard time finding another job, right? Job, J-O-B. What kind of advice, because you've been through this, you're speaking from experience. You're saying, hey, I've been here. I've been through this. It's tough. I know what it is. What would you tell them to look out for? And what would you have them do to put their eyes into the future of what can be?
Sure. Big question. What to stay away from? Okay. Look, because once you've got the biggest thing right now is knowing the assets that you have. And I'm not talking about financial assets,
Right.
the assets that you bring as a human being.
Right.
So first thing is evaluate those you associate yourself with. I believe that there's four types of people we associate with: leaders, lifters, loafers, and leeches. Most people associate themselves with loafers and leeches. Why? Because they just want to be heard. So stay away from the people that suck the life out of you. Stay away. Well, Glenn, I don't know any loafers and leeches. Well, then listen to podcasts like Greg's, who is constantly providing tools, wisdom, and insights to lift you up and get you to begin to start reimagining. So that's the people you associate with. Now it's you. I'll say what I said earlier. Face your truth. What is it that's holding you back? And write a list of 5 top things that's holding you back. And money cannot be one of them. And you're going to say, well, Glenn, I can't pay the bills. Well, I hate to say it this way, but there are jobs out there that don't require much for you to make money. So we have to swallow our pride and do what you need to do to survive right now. But in the interim, reintroduce yourself to yourself. Who are you? What do you want to be? What is it that gets you excited and makes you feel fulfilled? And I know that these are not novel questions, but why am I asking you this? Because what is it all at the end of the day? It's about how we navigate and manage opportunities. Can you see them? Are you acting on them? Are you trying to build momentum around the things that you're after? Are you even sharing opportunities with others? And I'll tell you one thing, what Greg is doing right now, and he shared this with me before the show because I want to use Greg as an example. He has poured his life into sharing and giving, sharing and giving, and sharing and giving. And that can be a lonely cycle because you don't want to expect anything from others in return, but you at least hope that the world is good enough to where someone is going to see opportunity in providing some reciprocity. But I share that because this is how he manages opportunities, and he does it extraordinarily well, extraordinarily genuine. He does it for the right reasons. What opportunity do you do for the right reasons? What is it? What is it that you've always wanted to do? And you might be thinking that you've run out of time. And don't ever think of time that you're chasing time. But what is it that you're chasing? And let me give you an idea of what most people say. They say, I'm chasing legacy. I'm chasing comfort. I'm chasing happiness. I'm chasing loyalty. I'm chasing the unknown. We're all chasing something. So I share this because being honest with yourself, it's like taking an inventory of everything that you think is where the odds are against you. But what are the things that you have on your side that you can then begin to take action on? Because if I've learned one thing about my life, is that I've lived a very happy and healthy life. And I've done a lot of things that are hard, like extraordinarily hard. Don't be fooled by you listening to me. I'm super articulate. I've had to acquire this. I've had to work on it.
Right.
But I bet on myself. And I share this because I truly believe in the hundreds of thousands of people that I've worked with. What holds them back is the fear of failure, and everybody's starting over again. So don't stop comparing yourself, get yourself around the right people. And again, if you have faith, dig into that Bible.
Well, I think
Right for you.
spirituality is a big element here we haven't mentioned, but we we can leave that for another show, but I would do highly mention it. I don't care if people out there listening are Muslim or Christian or Jewish or whatever they are, because my show reaches everybody, right? And one of our genres is spirituality.
Yeah.
And I will say that, you know, you having a faith beyond yourself in a greater power that exists, whatever that might be, individuals, it's very important because that's where you're going to draw your sustenance from. One of the things that I would say is you said chasing. What are you chasing? And if you start to become comfortable and true to yourself, it isn't so much about the chase as it is about the comfort that you're in. In other words, you can be uncomfortable. You can get in those places where you're going to climb Mount Everest or do whatever you're going to do to succeed and have some success. The point is, if you're running away from something towards something else, why are you running away from whatever it was? Truly analyze that. Look at that. Because the reality is that you manifested that. Now you want to manifest something else, and you think that something else is going to be better. And I see this happen so many times, Glenn, in relationships and divorce. It's like, well, I'm running away from ex Marianne because I'm going to ABC because I think that it's better. And I'm saying, did you ever look at the value of what it is that you have right in front of you? Because you've made up a story about what it isn't, not what it actually is. Now, I'm not saying in all cases it's going to work out, but that's true about a job as well. It's true about a career as well. You can learn and come to work every day, even if it's in a company that's using the standardization model, and you can bring the personalization to the standardization model and be the example inside the standardization model that can work. And you can do that. It can start one person at a time.
And that's how we do this. That's how it's done. But that's exactly how it's done. But it takes that one person who has the courage to do it, then gets the other person to do it, and the other person to do it. Why? Because what do they say to them? Man, I've been thinking the same thing for years. I'm on board. I'm on board. And what you start doing is you start building this movement of people who've said, look, we're not just in it for what we're being told. We're here to add value. So if I'm going to add real value, the only way I could do that is being more of who I am and what I represent, or as I say to people, what do you solve for? Like, what are those opportunities that you enjoy solving for the most? But I love what you're saying, Greg. It makes a lot of sense.
All of you go out, get a copy of this book, Make Reinvention Your Superpower. You know, Glenn, for years, people told me I'd go in and do consulting inside a business. I call myself the what is the resultant, not the consultant. And they would say, "No, you know what? You're an undercover evangelist, aren't you?" And I would say, "Well, if that's the way you want to look at me, because my license plate says illuminate on it, right? So when I drive up, it's illuminate. And I think you can be the light in the darkness. You can shine the light in there. And I will leave this podcast with this. Please try to be the light where there is darkness. Bring light to where, I mean, Kamala Harris said there's in her speeches. I think we need that right now, and especially when it comes to ourselves. So bring the light to yourself, treat yourself right, reinvent yourself, go out there and be who you can truly be. Do get this book because this will be, I call it a fire starter to get going. You'll actually do this. And again, watch that QR code because you can get the QR code and you get the whole little workbook that goes along with this. Glenn, honor having you back on again. I want to do this more because I just think it was a great dialogue to have. But I also know that listeners, they have a satiation level. So you got to go, hey, how much can I listen to this? I mean, I know Seth Rogen goes 2 hours, but he just kind of riffs. And you and I haven't been riffing. We've been talking about things that are quite substantial. So thanks for your appearance on the show. Thanks for contributing to our learning environment. Thanks for all that you're doing and still doing, and just appreciate you so much.
Well, Greg, thank you. I really love your style, the way you listen and go deeper into the subject matter. And, thank you for, investing thousands of episodes to be an enabler for opportunity for people. I mean, we need people like you, and I appreciate it. And thank you for the opportunity to allow me to contribute.
Your acknowledgement is well recognized. I appreciate it very much, Glenn. Have a blessed new year.
Likewise, Greg.
Thank you for listening to this podcast on Inside Personal Growth. We appreciate your support. And for more information about new podcasts, please go to InsidePersonalGrowth.com or any of your favorite channels to listen to our podcast. Thanks again, and have a wonderful day.